Hi everybody. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about annual goals so that you can get started on your IEP project. We are in the Gibbon Dykes PowerPoint that is in Blackboard, so you can access it there. I've updated it recently, so make sure that if you downloaded it earlier, this is a more recent copy that you might want to check that. So when we're talking about annual goals have to be measurable. If it can't be measurable, it violates IDEA, and that goal can be cause to throw out a child's IEP. So we need to make sure that our IEPs are measurable. So how do we do that? The best way to do that, I think, is to think about a child on a stage. And if we think about that student on a stage, we should be able to visualize every single thing that that student would need in order to accomplish the goal. So what do I mean by that? Well, it looks to me like I've got a student who has a piece of paper, a pencil, and a desk. So their goal might be, given a grade level math worksheet, John will complete 30 problems accurately in 3 out of 4 opportunities. Let's break that down. An annual goal has to be observable and measurable. It has to be repeatable, something you can do over and over again. It has to be understandable. If I can't understand it, if a parent can't understand it, or a student can't understand it, then it's not a goal that we're accurately measuring. And think about it as being doable. You have to be able to accomplish that goal within the context of an academic day, throughout the weeks, throughout the year of school. So let's look at some more information. The IEP goal has to be written clearly. There can't be additional information that's hidden somewhere. And that goal has to have the conditions, criterion, and what we call generalization and maintenance required to accomplish that goal. So here's what this looks like. If it's measurable, it has to be something the student can accomplish within the confines of 1 year, because that's how long an IEP is good for. A student can accomplish the goal sooner, and that just means we need to meet again and revise that goal. But it has to be something that we realistically think the student can read. So if a student is reading 5 words a minute, is it going to be accomplishable for a student to read 190 words a minute? That doesn't sound very reasonable to me. So think through it. It has to be measurable, something they can accomplish in a year. And how do we make these things measurable? Because we are basically giving our best professional judgment, our best professional guess. Think about the grade level expectations and the age level performance of this student. So if a student is performing on a second grade level, what's a reasonable leap from second grade level up to the next grade level? We are going to think about the rate at which a student performs that, and make sure that when you're thinking about rate, that it's a number that you can figure out. So don't come up with some complex formula that requires a math statistician to break it down. Make it easy. Let's talk more about what that means. When you're looking for a great formula to write a goal, I recommend that all students use this formula, and the reason for that is if you use this formula, you're not going to miss any of the components. So the formula reads like this: given, and then you're going to include the situation. So like we had given a grade level math worksheet, it could be given a stressful academic situation, given third period math. So choose that situation or the academic task. The student will. And remember that when we are writing objectives and writing the IEP, we never use the word student. That's just my generic. You need to put the student's name in there. So Jaquan will, Jamal will, Sarah will, Isha will, and then tell what they're going to do. So if we use the example of the grade level math worksheet, Sarah will complete 20 problems. With is the next part, and then you want some number or degree of accuracy. If Sarah's got 20 problems to complete, I'd like her to do that with at least 80% accuracy. And then we're going to look at the number of times till this goal is met. The reason for this last part is that we want that generalization and maintenance. We don't want a student to be a one-hit wonder, to do it once and never be able to repeat it, but we want them to be able to accomplish that goal over and over again. So we're going to measure if they're able to accomplish it in over multiple times or settings. So that in part is the over multiple settings. I like to not ever go for 100% accuracy or 100% of times unless the goal is something that's life-saving. Like we want the student to follow directions of safety in walking across the street 100%. We don't want a child hit by a car. But when we're looking at reading fluency, math fluency, comprehension, we want to give students that moment of grace for a bad day, not feeling well, a bad passage, math problems that were not properly tuned to their academic level. So think about those number of times as 3 out of 4, 5 out of 6. I use the number 3 out of 4 a lot of times because when we're measuring a goal, remember that we're measuring it weekly. So over the course of a month, 4 weeks, I'd like them to be able to accomplish that goal at least 3 times. That makes sense in my head, and you might come up with a different formula that makes sense for you, but that's just generally how I do that. So let's look at an example, actually 2. The first part is the given, what's happening on the stage. So given a grade level reading passage, John will read it out loud at a rate of 50 words per minute in 3 out of 4 situations. Or, given a calculator and a page of mixed 2-digit addition and subtraction facts, I can clearly see what I've got, right? What's on the stage. Becca will solve them with 80% accuracy in 3 out of 4 opportunities. So 2 examples of the way goals should be written. And remember, I would use that formula, especially on your IEP project, to make sure you're getting all the components in your goal. When you're looking for some examples and want to try and fix them, I've got some examples in this IEP PowerPoint that would be good practice. We'll be doing some of these in class. So saying Joe will have a better attitude towards school 80% of the time, I don't know what that means. A better attitude to me can be very different to you, the other observer, could be very different to Joe. So we need to specify that as given a large group reading time, Joe will raise his hand to ask a question in 3 out of 4 opportunities. That's much more observable and measurable. John will increase reading fluency to 100 words per minute in 3 out of 4 opportunities. That's a great start to a goal, but I don't know what John has to have. So I need to specify, given a 3rd grade reading passage, given a grade level reading passage, I don't have what I need on the stage to know that 100 words per minute, what it's measuring. Pete will demonstrate silent reading comprehension on multiple choice tests of text read at a 6th grade level. That's great, but I don't know what percent accuracy I'm looking for. 60%, 100%. Right now, as long as he does some multiple choice tests on a 6th grade level, he could have 0% accuracy and meet this goal. There's a few more goals you can fix, and I'll let you do those on your own. I'm going to go forward to talk about benchmarks. Right now in the state of Kentucky, goals are required, but benchmarks are not. However, you might be hired by a district or a school that requires benchmarks, so we'll make sure that we know how to write them in case the law changes or in case your school requires them. What a benchmark does is just break down that annual goal into intervals, and there are several choices in intervals we'll talk about in a second. But a smart practice when you're looking at those intervals is to make your intervals match your school grading periods. So usually you're going to have 3 to 4 benchmarks per goal. And why we do this is federal law requires that every time a student in the general education classroom takes home reports of progress, so that's usually our progress reports and report cards, students with IEPs also have to take home reports of progress on their IEP goals. So rather than have to write a progress report and then do a IEP progress report at separate times, it's smarter to set your benchmarks to match the grading report cards and progress reports so that you're doing those systematically on time. So when we're looking at benchmark choices, how are you going to decide what benchmarks to use? You can look at accuracy. So with math, fact solving, with reading fluency, a lot of times we look at accuracy. So we look at 40% accuracy, 60% accuracy, or accuracy in number of words. So 140 words per minute, 180 words per minute. For students with moderate to severe disabilities, a lot of times we look at assistance levels. So, a student might put on his coat with a full physical prompt, then with a partial prompt, then with maybe a point prompt and a verbal prompt. You can also look at task analysis, so breaking down a task into its parts. And you can use that for things like the writing process, algebraic formulas. You can look at this for completing tasks like following multi-step directions, or for students with moderate to severe disabilities, looking at things like eating, tying your shoes. All those things can be done through task analysis. You can also look at generalization, so students' ability to complete problems or advocate for their own needs in the resource room might be followed by a benchmark that looks at their success in the general education classroom, and then in the hallway or the cafeteria. So we're looking at benchmark choices of accuracy, assistance level, task analysis, and generalization. How often we measure goals and benchmarks depends on the district, but know that the best practice is to monitor progress toward goals weekly. So we'll be taking weekly sets of data on each goal. So again, you want to think back to that stage and the goal to think, can I measure this weekly, and what am I going to use to do this measurement? The thing that stresses out most teachers and can cause the most difficulty is not having a good plan of instruction for monitoring. So when I monitor IEP goals, I usually set up progress monitoring folders for every student with a physical piece of paper, whether that was a data sheet or a reading fluency page, a math fact page for every student, and I would set them up for the entire grading period. So I would have usually 12 weeks worth of data sheets, and I would pull those out on Monday and start progress monitoring. We are required to report that progress that we collect weekly to parents, again, as often as general education updates go home. So that would be progress report and report card time, and that has to be done in writing. And most schools use Infinite Campus or some other form, and you would use that format to turn those progress reports. Those progress reports have to be data driven, and you have to have the data charts to back them up. So whether you keep that in a Google Sheets or an Excel spreadsheet and print that out to send it home, parents have to have a record of our reporting and how we got that data. Some other important facts to know: all data that is collected is part of the student's legal record, so you need to maintain that and then put it in with their IEP files at the end of the year, or however often your school district requires you to keep that data. Know that all IEP data that is collected and all IEP goals, that's confidential and should be kept in a safe, locked place. Most schools require that IEP data be kept twice locked, so that might be locked in your desk in a locked classroom unless you are physically in the room with the data. And know that that data has to be maintained with the IEP record and student charts, so that data is kept forever, ever. You need to keep that data all together, confidentially locked up at all times. When we're looking at IEPs, we're also looking at the amount of services students receive. And we'll go into greater detail and talk about services in class, but it's a good practice to go ahead and scan the rest of the PowerPoint that's in Blackboard to start looking at and understanding services and how we talk about those. Whether we're looking at special education services, which would be the special education teacher, whether we're talking about related services, which would be OT, PT, speech, or other services. We could be looking at supplementary aids and services and personnel support. The support of a paraprofessional is never included under special education services, but can be included under personnel support. Every service that we provide a student has to have a beginning and end date, which follows the IEP usually, and we have to tell how much time is being given. So for example, a student might receive special education services of 30 minutes a day. All right, well, that's all we're going to cover in this PowerPoint. If you have questions, let me know. If not, continue reviewing the PowerPoint and we'll work on examples in class.